Hello, everyone. It is so great to be here with you all tonight. My name is Sara Kaufman. I'm an undergraduate student at Johns Hopkins University, where I am studying biomedical engineering and creative writing as a Charles Westgate Scholar in engineering. I'll go ahead and introduce my co-presenter right now, who's Addison. You're on mute, just to let you know.
I'm so sorry. Hello, everyone. I'm Addison, and I'm a freshman on a biology major on the pre-med track at Southwestern University, which is a private liberal arts school. And I'm here today because when I was applying for college, I felt really lost, and I knew what I wanted to say in my essays, but I didn't always know how to say it, and so the whole process felt really overwhelming. And so I was really grateful to hear back from my dream school where I currently am, thankfully, within just 2 months of applying. So I didn't really have to stress as much where I'd end up, but at the same time, I watched so many of my friends panic and stress over their applications, and it honestly made me really sad for them. And even now, a lot of my friends back in high school are going through the same stress, and it reminded me of how much I felt when I was in their shoes. And so that's why I'm really excited to be here today. I realized that a lot of people feel just as lost as I did, and so I wanted to help make the process a little less intimidating, and if I can share some tips or lessons from my own experience that makes things clear, then hopefully you won't have to feel quite as stressed as I did.
That is such a great story, Addison. As we get started on that note, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can get the presentation rolling. That should be up. And we're going to be talking tonight about crafting your college essays. Let's do this. So to give you a rundown of what tonight is going to look like, we're going to start off by talking about the college application process at large, and then move into how NSHSS and Parse, the two organizations co-hosting this exciting webinar, can support you in that journey. Then we're going to go into the personal statement, what that looks like, and then delve into the supplemental essays. Finally, Addison is going to do an awesome portion on revising essays, and then we can do a Q&A for you all to ask us your questions. Let's talk a little bit about the college application process at large. There's a lot of terminology that gets thrown around, so I'd love to start by just introducing that at the very beginning with what that timeline is going to look like. So when you're applying to college, you might apply regular decision or RD. This is what I did when I applied to school. It's your typical college application timeframe where you're applying towards the end of the fall semester, and then you're hearing back in the early spring and committing around May. You also have early decision or ED options. This is a binding application where you apply early to one institution, and if they let you in, with a few exceptions, you kind of have to go there. You have ED1 and ED2. ED1 occurs first. It is where you generally apply if you have a dream school, and then if you don't get in ED1, some schools also offer an ED2 option, and this is kind of a second round of early decision. So if you have two schools that you are really interested in going to and that you know you can afford depending on the financial aid package that they offer you, applying ED1 and or 2 is a really, really good option to kind of secure your spot early on in the college application process. You also have early action or EA. This functions very similarly to ED, except it's not binding. So you can apply to multiple schools early action, hear back sooner, and kind of get that stress of the college application process over with a lot sooner than you would had you been doing RD decisions. Finally, there is REA, or restrictive early action. This is like a cross between an EA and an ED. So you can apply to one school REA, but not other ones, except when you get in, you don't have to commit there. So I know Harvard, for example, does REA applications where they did the year that I applied. There's another option for getting into schools if you're not going in through an athletics or through other extenuating circumstances, and this is a rolling admission. A lot of schools will offer this. For example, Florida International University, which I applied to, you will apply you submit your application depending on one of multiple deadlines, and then applications are reviewed in batches. So you only are compared to other people who are applying in your batch. This is a really cool option because if you apply early enough, there are a lot of spots open, so you have a higher chance of getting in depending on when you apply. You also get to hear back a lot sooner. Generally, applications maybe take a few weeks to maybe a month or two to come back with a decision, as compared to that giant time frame and that giant waiting period you might have with RD or even some of the early options. we're talking about this timeline. So what should your college or preparatory experience look like while you are in high school? This is a graphic that you can find on Parse's website, and it really takes you through the very beginning of ninth grade all the way towards the end of your senior year. So 9th and 10th grade are your underclassmen years of high school, and they exist to help you find and cement your passions, figure out the transition to high school, because it's very different from middle school, just as college is very different from high school. You're finding that transition, you're getting involved with extracurriculars, you're meeting people, joining clubs, starting to figure out what your passion is. I got very lucky that I found my passion relatively early on in early 9th grade, early to mid 9th grade, and from there I was able to keep exploring that passion as I continued throughout 10th grade and then in the fall. So when you hit the fall of your junior year, we're talking the first semester, this is a great time to start thinking ahead to what your summer before senior year is going to look like. This is a really pivotal summer because it's often a first chance most students get to engage with their field of choice. So in my case, I was really lucky that I got to start doing science research at a university the summer before my senior year. There are a lot of internships that are open to seniors, a lot of jobs, a lot of programs, and the junior fall is a great time to start looking into them and checking those deadlines. A lot of deadlines happen around the junior fall, maybe winter or spring, so getting an early start, seeing where you want to apply, seeing what companies or what positions are open for you in your area or even abroad or in other parts of the country, getting that early start is super, super great. Throughout 11th grade, you're also going to start looking at your college application process. In 11th grade, I suggest that people start looking at what schools interest them. When you're picking schools that interest you, you're going to look at factors like location. Are they close to home? Are they far away from home? Is that what you want? Are they in a city? Are they in a rural area? How close do you want to be to maybe other schools and other communities of colleges? And then also take a look at what programs exist in those schools. So I am majoring in biomedical engineering, but when I applied, I saw schools like MIT, for example, have biological engineering instead of biomedical engineering majors. So I was looking explicitly for my BME, my biomedical engineering, because that is what I wanted to go into. The summer before your 12th grade, as we mentioned, is that deep dive into your passions. It's a great time to find an internship, to find a program, and if you can't, to work a job or to work somewhere and get that experience of engaging with the field that you think might be interesting. This can look like anything from a research internship to a work or corporate marketing internship, all the way to volunteering at a hospital, for example, or to working at a summer camp, working at a store near your house. Getting that professional experience is super, super great, and it prepares you for how you not only apply to college, but what you do in college. As the summer gets going, you're going to want to start looking at your actual applications. So around this point, you're going to have identified what schools you want to apply to, and then you're going to have started looking at letters of recommendation. So your letters of recommendation are going to come from a coach or a mentor, a teacher, someone who knows you really well and can speak to your character. You want to start asking for these sooner than later to give that coach or mentor enough time to write about you and to be able to properly think through their essay. A lot of these people will get hit with, 100 requests for letters of recommendation, and you want to make sure that yours isn't the one that they're doing when they have like a night to complete it. You want to make sure that you give them enough time to really think through and personalize that letter to who you are. So then once you reach the summer, you're going to start writing your own application materials. I started my Common App around June, and then I was able to write my big application essay. And we're going to go into a little bit more about these essays later on, but you're going to want to start brainstorming and thinking through them over the summer so that you have enough time to hash out all your ideas and start revising those essays before the school year starts and you have to deal with the stress of classes. In August, that's a great time to start looking at your school-specific essays, and again, we'll go into more information about this later on, but these essays can really pile up because there are a lot of short essays. So the sooner you start on these again, the better. They generally open up around August. In September and the early fall, your early decision and early application deadlines are going to start coming up. So you're going to want to get those ready to submit around then. And then if you're applying regular decision, you're going to be submitting those around December to February, around that winter area. In the spring, you'll start hearing back from your schools, and this is the moment we've all been waiting for. You're going to figure out where you got in and where you want to go. This can also be very stressful, but Parse has resources in case you need to help picking a school. And then you're going to commit. Generally, the deadline to commit to a school is around May 1st. There are a bunch of different platforms that you can submit your college applications on. The Common App is the most common, or the one that I used to when I applied to college. It has over 1,000 schools on there, which is really awesome because most schools are on there, and you can kind of get a sense of what these different schools look like and find them all on one place. It is the most established and prevalent platform. There are other ones out there, like the Coalition application. This one's really cool because it has a great emphasis on accessibility and offering opportunities for underrepresented groups. It does have a much smaller number of schools on there, but it also offers this My Locker feature for document storage, which is really great, so that you can submit your application materials, like your transcripts and your letters of recommendation, early on. There is also the Common Black application, which exists for HBCUs. I really love that they have only one fee covering multiple schools. So for example, for the Common App, if you're applying to 20 schools, each school is going to have their own application fee requirements, and that can get really expensive really quickly. If you're applying to HBCUs through the Common Black App, you only have to worry about one fee, regardless of how many schools you're applying to. There is also the Universal College application, which has around 20 schools, and they're really cool because they allow edits after your submissions, which a lot of other schools and a lot of other platforms do not offer. There's also QuestBridge, which I love the work that they do. They help connect low-income and first-generation students with partner schools. The way this works is you apply to QuestBridge before the college applications start, and they either accept or do not match you to a school. If you are accepted and you are matched, you're going to go to one of the schools that you list out on the application with a full ride scholarship, which is super, super amazing. And even if you don't get matched, they offer benefits for people who applied through their programs, which is also a great plus of applying through QuestBridge if you qualify. Finally, you'll have school-specific platforms. So I know MIT, the University of California schools, and other universities have their own applications and don't partake in these common or larger applications. So you're going to want to look at this ahead of time and figure out which platforms are best for you. Now that you know where you want to apply, you have your documents about ready to go, and you know where you're going to apply, we're going to talk a little bit about the components of a college application. I listed these out in around the order of how much control you have over each part. So we're starting with your essays, which are completely on you to talk about. You don't have to worry about these when you're a freshman or a sophomore in high school. You get to them as a senior, and this is your time to tell your story. So even, for example, if you didn't have a bunch of extracurriculars, or if your grades weren't all that great at the beginning, you still have control over writing an awesome, awesome essay, which is why they're so important and so crucial for the college application process. Then you also have your activities and your awards. This is again something that you describe what you've done, which makes it a really great opportunity to showcase your skills, showcase your character, showcase your personality, and make up for any deficiencies, for lack of a better word, that you might have in other components of your application. You also have your letters of recommendation, and even though someone else is writing these for you, you have control over who you can pick to write your letter, how well they know you, how early you submit these requests for letters of recommendation. So giving these requests out to people who know you very well with enough time for them to write them is a really, really smart move, because it gets you these strong letters of recommendation that will help supplement your application and help push it up. For a lot of schools, you might also have an interview or a portfolio in. I know the Ivies, for example, when I applied to some of the Ivies, I was very lucky to get interviews, and we met at coffee shops and talked about my experience over coffee. I was able to learn a little bit more about the schools. When you go into an interview, it's super, super important that you have questions ready to ask the person who's interviewing you. I know that there's a school that I applied to where I asked the interviewer what they got out of that school, what their favorite part of attending the school was, and the answer that the interviewer gave actually motivated me to not consider that school as strongly anymore. It pushed me away from the school. So when you're going into these interviews, remember that it's an interview where they're judging you as much as you're judging them, and you still can make the decision of, I wonder how the school might fit me. I wonder if I'm a good fit for this school. For your portfolios, a lot of schools, art schools will take portfolios. A lot of engineering schools might take maker portfolios. I know Brown also has a video essay component, so you can get really creative with these portfolios. Again, showcase your personality. You also have your transcript, which covers the classes that you've taken and what your grades were in those classes, as well as any honors or classes that you've taken outside of your school. This is a little bit trickier to have that control over because something from freshman year of high school might end up on your transcript. But even if you didn't get great grades, you can often offer some supplementary information regarding extenuating circumstances that may have applied, or a little bit more information on the trajectory of your grades. I've heard a lot of people say this, that it's really important that you have a positive trajectory instead of positive grades all around. So even if you had some trouble adjusting to high school at the beginning, if your grades are improving as you're going through high school, that's often a really, really good sign to college admissions officers. And it's often going to be weighted really heavily when they consider your applications to kind of make up for those lower grades at the beginning. You also have the question that I get a lot of, should I take easier classes that I know I can do well in, or should I challenge myself and take harder classes, even if that means maybe getting a worse grade? And I think it's really great. A lot of schools actually look for students who challenge themselves and take on that extra opportunity to learn and to become better students. So even if there's a class that is a little bit tricky that you're struggling with, the process of getting through that class and of learning that information, of internalizing it, is going to look really good, not only for you and how you grow as a person and then teaching you the skills to face challenges later on, but in your college application. Finally, there are components there are also the standardized test scores, and then finally components like demonstrated interest, demographics, prospective major, and other factors that you don't really have control over also go into your application. So some schools will consider demonstrated interest, which means, have you expressed a desire to go to the school? Have you interacted with the school at all? If you're on a mailing list, if you're opening their emails, if there's a campus representative who comes to an area near you, did you engage with any of their attempts to reach out? There are things like demographics and prospective majors that you have zero control over. When college admissions officers go to read an application, they often are seeking to pick the class and to shape the class to get some representation from different majors, different areas, different people. So I remember going into this and I was like, okay, if I get rejected from my top school because I'm not a saxophone player and they didn't see me with the potential to be in that niche of a saxophone player, that's fine. That is out of my control. It's important that you put your best foot forward and remember that there are factors into play here that you have zero idea what they are, you have zero idea how to control them. So as long as you're putting your best foot forward in your application, that is the part that really matters here. Let's take a look now at how NSHSS and Parse can support you throughout this crazy journey. I want to begin by introducing Parse because I know a lot of students haven't heard of it before. Parse is an initiative that I founded back in 2022 to help make education more accessible to people. We began by offering resources on getting involved with science research, the scientific method, that line of inquiry, and then when I applied to college, people started asking me for advice, and I was like, okay, I will send you some messages with some things that I learned, some lessons I learned. And I got more of these requests, and I was sending the same text 50 times, and I got sick of that. So I put my resources on a website, and I was like, this is the advice that I learned the hard way. This is the scholarship list that I used to fund my college education. You can have it, you can access it, you can share it with your friends if you want. And after sending that out, Parse started to grow. And now we are in 28 different countries. We have thousands of users. We just hit 10,000 views, which is super, super exciting. And it does serve as this hub of resources for students to use around the globe if they're seeking to go to college, for example, in the US. We are also partnered with a bunch of different organizations. You can see First Robotics on there, HHF, Sigma Xi, if any of those names sound familiar. Our partners do some really, really amazing work, and they've been able to help us reach more students and integrate some of their programs into our resources. Let's look at some of the opportunities for learning that exist within both Parse and within NSHSS. So if you go to that blue link to parsecollege.org, you will see some of the advice that is on Parse. The whole idea of Parse is that we're breaking down these scary processes into something that makes a little bit more sense, or it seems a little bit less intimidating, using the advice that I learned throughout the way as I did it. We have Parse College if you're looking to get into college, Parse Research if you're hoping to get involved with scientific research, and then if you're a college student and want to go to medical school, we also have Parse MD. NSHSS also offers some amazing opportunities. They have webinars like the one that you are in right now, which is awesome because you're already taking that first step. And then they also host a lot of events and trips where you can go and learn, for example, at a college fair, college career fair, like the one in that picture, about different opportunities that are available to you, and you can actually get to interact with some people who are representing these organizations. Both programs also have amazing online Instagram social media presences that offer some opportunities and keep you posted on the events that come up. And then Parse also has webinars specifically tailored to the scientific method. There are also opportunities for leadership and engagement within both platforms. Both have ambassadorship programs, which is super exciting. NSHSS's ambassadorship program focuses a lot on volunteerism, a lot on media and marketing and putting yourself out there, personal branding. What I really love about the NSHSS ambassadorship program too is that it's a great way to connect with other students. From what I was hearing earlier too, since the years that I've done it, it's really branched off to be very student-led. So it's a great opportunity to lead initiatives, to interact with people who are like and unlike you, and to get to build a strong support network. Parse's ambassadorship is a little bit different. It teaches you explicitly networking with college students around the country. It teaches you personal branding and speaking skills as well. You, as part of the ambassadorship program, put together a speech. And then it also teaches you how to cold email and gives you some skills that you will apply in college. Keep in mind that the NSHSS ambassadorship program does have a deadline coming up soon if you're interested in applying. Once you get to college, NSHSS also has a Collegiate Council, where again, you get to have these leadership experiences. That's how I'm giving this webinar today, and you get to meet other college students from around the country, like Addison. NSHSS also offers a bunch of different scholarship opportunities and the Be More Fund, which I really love. They give $10,000 out to projects to really fuel these passion projects. And passion projects are awesome, not only for developing your own personal goals, repertoire, experience, getting to do something that you love and make a difference through it, but also to put on your college application. There are more opportunities available on both Parse and NSHSS's websites. So let's get into why we're all here. Let's talk about drafting these personal statements, these Common App applications, and then also the school-specific essays. On the Common App, these are the full set of prompts for this year's application. They range from talking about your identity to talking about challenges that you've encountered and talking about the lessons you've overcome. When I applied to college, I did have a counselor, which I was very fortunate to, and he suggested that I pick prompt 7, even if I'm talking about something that might fall under a different category. This way, if I decide that in the middle of my writing I want to veer off in a direction that is not covered by one of the explicit questions, I can do so without losing points for not sticking to a prompt. So I did want to pass that on, but if you see a prompt that calls to you and you want to answer that prompt, by all means, go for it. This is the advice that is available on Parse's website. You can find it online, but it does talk a little bit about the structure that I use, which you're going to go into more detail about in a second. It does, I do want to point out here that it's a lot about storytelling. It's a lot about this happened and this happened, this is how it shaped me. So it's not just listing out a resume or not just bullet pointing things that happened, things that you did, but about tying them together into a lesson. And that lesson component is super, super important. I will be harping on that a little bit more as we continue. This is kind of the secret sauce that I use to write essays when I apply for something, so I'm really excited to be putting it out there and sharing it with you all. I always like to start with a hook. I think butterfly effect when I write this hook, where I want to bring something unrelated to the rest of my essay and tie it in a really creative way. So a good example for this might be a joke, a personal experience, a fun fact that you know, or even a piece of media that you've engaged with recently that you think is really relevant to who you are now. Then the bulk of your essay, once you've drawn your reader in, is going to be the story, the main thing that you're talking about. I want to point out here that most personal statements are not like the essays that you write for a class. They do not have a strong thesis statement. They do not have that introduction cone that teachers love to talk about. It's really talking about your experience and your journey, and it can be a little bit less formal and a little bit less organized as well. For the story component, I sometimes talk about something that I did, and then I can tie it into different components of a story that follows along the same path. So for example, if I'm talking about research, I might start at the very beginning and what made me interested in research, and then talk about the research that I've done. Sometimes though, that's not the best fit. It's not the best idea to go in chronological order. I'll start with the research that I'm doing right now, and then why it's important, why I like it, why I'm passionate about it, and that still counts as a story. At some point in the story, you might want to work in your credentials. You can hype yourself up a little bit, toot your own horn, and you can work in an accomplishment or two that you've achieved. This does not have to be an official award. An accomplishment can mean something like, in my case, a patient that I was volunteering with smiled at me, and that made my day, that made my month. I'm still so happy even thinking about that smile that I got from that patient. So it does not have to be an official award. Even if you haven't won any national titles or anything, you still have accomplishments, and there's still things to highlight in your essay about what you've achieved. Towards the end of your essay, I like to go into a future focus. So this is looking at the moral of the story. What do I want to share from the story that I gave? What do I think is important? What do I want my reader to leave with? And how does it tie into what I want to do going forward? For a college essay, this might look like what you want to explore while you're in college, and what you want to bring to the university, what you want to offer, and then what you want to do afterwards. And even if you don't know, that's okay. Sometimes exploring is half of the fun, and talking about how you want to try these different things and how you want to grow as a person can be very, very powerful for a college essay. At the very end, I like to close by relating my narrative back to the hook that I started with, just to kind of have a full circle moment and give the reader a funny or a hopeful or some other emotive ending to the essay. Here are a few common pitfalls with the personal statement. And these are things that I've both written and then had to go back and edit out, and that I've seen other people write when I've edited essays. It's really, really easy to fall into cliches and common sayings, common stories. I know if you look up online of what not to talk about, there's a whole list of things that you should avoid, because a lot of people write about those. Sometimes that's a good idea to avoid. Sometimes if it's a story that is really personal and true to you and you want to tell it regardless of whether or not some guy on Reddit told you to, that is also okay to do. But regardless of what story you're telling, you want to avoid listing out a resume. You want to avoid bullet pointing things out. They have your transcript. They can see what you've done. They can see what classes you've taken. The college admissions officers can see your activities. They know all this information about you. You don't need to spend your personal essay writing back, I did this, and then I did this, and then this happened, and by the way, I won this award. So really focus on storytelling. On that note, try to avoid excessive negativity. With a lot of these applications, at least in my experience, this is something I've witnessed personally, you want to see what you're going to bring to this school, what you're going to bring to your future, for example. And if you are being very negative and not offering a little bit of that hope, a little bit of that positivity towards the end, it can make it a little bit trickier for college application reader audiences to better understand who you are as a person, or to see that positivity that you might be able to bring. Another common pitfall for personal statements might be typos and lack of proofreading. When you write your personal statement, I had suggested in the timeline earlier, starting it really well ahead of time, long before the application is due. And this allows you to proofread. Afterwards, it allows maybe a parent to proofread, a teacher to proofread, a guidance counselor, a college application counselor if you have one. And getting this input from multiple different people is really powerful to make sure that not only are you communicating yourself effectively and are you saying the things that you want to say, but to make sure you dotted all your I's, crossed all your T's, didn't add any extraneous letters, and have complete sentences. That readability component is really important for me. I know I tend to write really long sentences, so if I show my essay to someone and they go, Sarah, this sentence is like 4 lines long, you need to cut it up into multiple sentences, I wouldn't catch that on my own until I was told to do it. So that proofreading is really, really good, because you get an opinion of someone who is unlike your own. Again, on that note, grammatical errors, when you're applying and you're submitting an essay, you want to put your best foot forward. So having a grammar checker maybe, or someone to go in and make sure that, again, you're starting all your sentences with a capital letter, that you're not having any run-on sentences or any incomplete clauses. It's really important to make sure that you're communicating yourself effectively, not only in what you're saying, but how you're saying it. On that note, telling instead of showing is a very common pitfall. Saying, I learned this explicitly, saying, I left with this lesson, is not really a great idea, because you want to show your reader that you left with that lesson. You want to show them what taught you, the thing that you gleaned from that experience, and why it's important to you. Finally, writing too informally or too formally can also be a little bit of a pitfall. With these application essays, the way I like to see them is they're a great show of your character and of your personality. And if you are spending this personality being very cold, very formal, almost like you're writing an informative essay for a class, it's not going to be able to show the application committee your true colors and the fun that you can bring to a college experience. When you're preparing your essay, again, begin months in advance. Have plenty of time so that you're not stressed out about this, and you can take the time to revise and write the essay that you think puts your best foot forward. I also suggest sometimes outlining the essays in advance, or at least, even if you're not bullet pointing or outlining explicitly, having an idea of what you want to get across and what message you want to send through this essay. Also, don't be afraid to start over. I wrote my Common App personal statement, I think 2 or 3 times. I had 2 or 3 separate 600-word essays that I had sitting in the document because I didn't like them. I wanted to perfect them. I wanted to put my best foot forward. So again, starting with enough time gives you the ability to do that ahead of time. On that note, learn from examples, but avoid plagiarism. There is a lot of information available online. There's a lot to go through that you can read. If you really want to fall down that rabbit hole, you absolutely can. Learning from examples allows you to get a sense of what has worked for other people, what has not worked for other people. But on that note, what worked for someone else probably won't work for you because you're different people. So avoid plagiarism, make sure that all the ideas that you're putting forth are actually your own. Next, seek multiple rounds of revision. Again, as we had talked about, getting a perspective from someone who is unlike you is really powerful for catching the mistakes that you make that you might not realize that you made. Finally, aim for descriptive wording, but balance it with legibility. It's really easy to get lost in the beauty of the English language sometimes and have this really flowery language that's really beautiful, but that someone else who's reading might not be able to understand. So on that note again, having those revision rounds is really powerful for making sure that all of the things that you're trying to say are being communicated effectively. Let's get into the supplemental essays now. There are a bunch of prompts that a school might throw at you. A school might have 0 supplemental essays, or they might have, 7 or 8. I applied to a school with a lot of supplemental essays. It was a lot of writing. Some of the common prompts that they might ask you to fulfill include the why us prompt. So why did you choose to come to this school? Why did you choose your major for this school? They might also ask you to highlight something important to you. They might throw you a diversity prompt at least. I was going back through my essays and I got a lot of diversity prompts or even adversity prompts. Of what challenges have you overcome? So let's start off with the structure of a supplemental essay. These are a lot shorter than your other essays. Some of them might ask you for a sentence or two, 75 words. Some of them might be a little bit lengthier to 400 words, but don't worry, you're not going to have to write a multiple page essay again like you already did for your personal statement in most cases. For these, you're going to want to make your hook bold and quick. So unlike the personal statement where you have a bunch of space to work with, here you really only have a few sentences. So getting to the point a little bit sooner often works in your favor. Also, show off what you know. In cases of the why us or the why major essays, that's a great opportunity to talk a little bit about what you've learned about the program, what you've learned about the opportunity, what you know about them, and why that interests you. Specifically looking at the why us essays, here are a few common things that might be good to talk about. Schools love to flaunt their school and class size. So are you looking for a big school with lots of opportunities to meet new people, to get involved with all sorts of different things? Or are you looking for a smaller school where you can get to know your peers a little bit more closely? Are you looking for specific clubs, maybe a lab? There's research going on at the school that really interests you. Is there a specific opportunity at the school that you really want to get engaged with? How's the school culture? I was talking to a student who had been accepted to the University of Michigan and to Johns Hopkins, and they were trying to figure out which school culture better aligned with their goals. We were talking a little bit about the work hard, play hard mentality that can exist in some schools, while other schools have less school spirit and are more focused on academics. So look at how that fits into your goals. When you're writing these essays, there are a few pitfalls that you can fall into. I was explicitly told not to talk about the weather at any of the schools I was applying to, and to avoid the location. This is a little bit iffy if you're talking about wanting to get involved with a city, for example. This is something that Hopkins is very big on, getting involved with Baltimore, with the community. That might be a good thing to talk about, but if you're saying, oh, I want to live in New York because it's cool, that's not really going to help your essay. I think a lot of people would want to live in New York because it is a cool city. Don't talk about the food or the housing unless it is related to something professional, the campus aesthetic, all schools are beautiful, etc. If you do want to include some of these topics, they might be good for a joke towards the end of your essay and saying, I really like this, by the way, the weather is fun. If you word that a little bit better than I did just now, that might be a fun thing to throw in towards the end of your essay. So I'll go ahead and pass the mic over to Addison now to go over revising essays.
Thank you. So for revising essays, if you want to move on to the next slide. Sarah, could you switch to the next slide for me, please?
I just did. You should be able to see it.
Okay, I see it now. Okay, so when I was writing my college essay, I thought I had a really strong story, but it didn't really come together until I actually asked for feedback. And I was a swimmer for 10 years, and my assistant coach on varsity, who happened to be an English teacher, helped me see where my essay needed more flow and more clarity. And that process taught me how valuable revision is. You don't really just want to fix mistakes, you want to make the story shine, which can set you apart from everyone else who's applying. And so, some things to watch out for when you're revising. You really want to make sure that you look for the small stuff, so typos, grammar, awkward phrasing, and most importantly, the big picture. You want to ask yourself, does my story flow or does it feel choppy? Am I repeating ideas without adding depth? Does it actually sound like me or does it feel like I'm forcing it? Or most importantly, am I balancing the storytelling with reflection, not just what I did, but why it mattered? And going back to what Sara mentioned with the revision and what I just said, you really want to make sure that your essay sounds like you. And while you do want to get extra pairs of eyes to read it, see any thing that you want to tweak, you want to make sure that you don't show too many people, because the more input you get, the more you're going to want to change it. And then at some point, there's a very fine line between having your essay sound like you and then having your essay sound like everyone else's ideas. So it may not even sound like you towards the end. And so this next paragraph is actually the introductory paragraph of my college essay, and we can go through it. So the pool, a vast blue expanse, felt like another world, an escape, a challenge, and a playground all at once. Through 10 years of training, I learned resilience and discipline, not only from long practices, but also from the contrasting lessons of two coaches, one who pushed me to my limits, and another who reminded me of the joy in the journey. When I began coaching, I blended their approaches, driving swimmers to test their limits while also teaching them to value growth over medals. Swimming shaped me into a mentor, showing me that true success is measured in growth, not just in victories. So I'm going to break this down. Like I said, this is a section of my actual essay, and what works here was the vivid imagery that I try to create. It's not just I swam, it's immersive. You can see my journey from an athlete to a coach and how the values shaped me. And that's the kind of reflection colleges want, not just what you did, but what it taught you. So showing that growth over time. In this next slide is another paragraph, not from my essay, but more of a simplistic version. And so I'll read it out again, like I did for the other one. I did swim for 11 years. I woke up early every day and worked really hard at practice. My coaches taught me discipline and to never give up. Swimming made me a strong person and helped me become a leader. It was a lot of work, but I learned to push myself, and I learned to push myself, and that practice makes perfect. So, as you can tell, they're very different, but they're trying to tell the same story. This one is very genetic and repetitive. Phrases like worked really hard, never give up, practice make perfect, or cliches that don't reveal anything personal. It also lacks depth and focuses only on the surface level facts, like waking up early and working hard, instead of exploring what these experiences really meant to the writer. And there's no storytelling or any immersive part. It doesn't really paint a picture or engage the reader, and it reads more like a list of traits rather than a narrative. And it's very minimal in reflection, and it states that discipline, strong person, without actually showing how these lessons were learned or applied. And so the main difference between these two, specifically on this one, is that this needs more concrete and unique details. So maybe even a specific challenge, a breakthrough moment, and it really needs to focus on personal growth and the identity rather than just the effort. And like how Sara said, how she likes to structure her essays, is that she really likes the hook. And I quite like a hook as well. There's no hook here, especially that first sentence. That hook is what's going to draw all the readers in. And I did swim for 11 years is not that interesting. So you really want to make sure that you have a really interesting hook so that the readers are engaged and actually want to read the rest of your essay.
That was awesome. Thank you so much for providing that insight on the revisions, and I love reading part of your essay over there. If anyone has any questions, we both have our contact information on the slide right now. And you can also put questions into the Q&A function or into the chat, and we can go through them right now. So we'll give you guys a few seconds or some time to put some questions into the chat. I do see one that was asking about the deciding factor that went into choosing a school. I know Addison talked a little bit about that in her answer to the question, but in my case, I applied to Johns Hopkins largely because of how amazing its programs were. I was really looking at this from an academic perspective. I've seen that they were doing research that I found interesting, that they had programs that I thought were cool. And then also when I applied, I was very fortunate that the finances at Hopkins worked out pretty well for me. So the financial component did become relatively significant in my choosing a school. Another question just came in, and it's asking about when a good time is to start collecting recommendation letters. That's such a great point. I think that submitting those requests, talking to your teachers, to your coaches early on, maybe around the spring of your junior year, is a really great time because it gives them a few months to think through their essays, to revise, and especially since they're on summer break and hopefully not as busy during that time, they'll be able to give your essay a little bit more, or your story, your letter, a little bit more attention. Addie, feel free to jump in on that, or if there's another question that comes in.
Yes. I asked my teachers and coaches who gave me my recommendation back in the spring of my junior year just because I wanted them to get some time in to really think about it, because the letters of recommendation, you're not supposed to read them. You actually have to sign a contract. And so you want to give them as much time as possible to make sure that they can really go through when writing them, just so that they can portray the best version of you there as possible.
That's a great point. I see another question here in the chat that's asking about the essay revision process. So even though I'm not able to review essays right now, Addie, if that is a different situation for you, go ahead and jump in.
So send the essays for you guys to review. I think just having, I was very fortunate enough to have one of my coaches be an English teacher, and so I trusted him to review my essay. So I think I even asked my parents to help review my essay, and I'm very grateful for that. But I think just getting more eyes on your essays so that you can just be more confident in it. And if you look at your essay for long enough, it's just going to blur by. And so just having a new set of eyes that can look through any typos or just anything that you might want to change or might just sound weird to other people but not to you would be great. And your essays don't have to be tied to your major. I'm a biology major on the pre-med track, and my essay was about swimming, so they do not have to be tied to your major.
That's a great point. I think there is value in tying it to an experience that might be relevant to what you want to do. But again, as Addie said, it does not have to be explicitly to your major. I also want to point out a resource here on Parse under completing applications and projects that says free peer essay review through College Find. This is a resource that I used when I was applying, where you go on this website and you review other people's essays and you accrue these points. Then you're able to go back and have your essays reviewed by other people completely anonymously. I think it's a really cool tool for, again, checking with short notice because it's relatively instant. And then it also gets a student perspective on your writing, which I think is really, really great. I see a question here about writer's block, and I think that's a really great point. When you're staring at this thing, sometimes the longer that you stare at a prompt, the harder it gets to write about. So when I was trying to figure out what to write about, I thought about my future. I thought about what I wanted to accomplish, and then I looked back and I was like, what were some pivotal moments that helped me choose that path? So I think going back and thinking about your journey, thinking about what shaped you, thinking about who has been a good role model for you, who has been really influential in your journey, those are some really, really great points to start with when you're going back and trying to overcome that writer's block.
I see another question. If you could give one piece of advice overall, what would it be? Personally, I would say to make a timeline. I know it's September, and so you guys are probably already should have been thinking about what you want to write, your personal statement, but I wish I had more of a set timeline. Um, I'm from Texas, and so I wanted to stay in state. And one of the schools I applied to, UT, I'm sure a lot of people know about this school, but their deadline was a lot earlier, and I almost missed the deadline. And I actually submitted my application for that school the day that it was due, and I wish that I didn't because there were some mistakes. So my biggest advice was to really plan out and make sure you have an entire list or calendar of the due dates of every single due date for the colleges.
Good point. I see some clarification questions coming up in the Q&A. The essay and the personal statements are intertwined. So there are different categories of essays. You have the personal statement essay, and then you have the supplemental essays. So they're all essays. They're just covering different things. Then I also see here that there's a question about an essay relating to a specific story or an experience that has spanned someone's entire life, and both are totally okay. I gave the example of the specific story because that's what I use, but everyone is a little bit different. Everyone has different experiences, and if you have a trajectory or a path that you really want to talk about that has spanned longer than a specific moment or a collection of specific moments, that is totally okay to talk about too.
Yes, going back on the question on the essay and the personal statement are different things. I think you mean the supplemental essays. They are different things. However, some schools may not require a personal statement, but the prompts for like a supplemental essay could be the same as your personal statement. That happened to me with a couple schools, so that was just one less thing for you to write. And these college, if you ever go and tour the colleges and you're able to sit in on some of the information sessions, they'll tell you that they don't have a personal statement essay that you could submit, but one of their other prompts is the exact same as a personal statement essay, so they just tell you to copy and paste that essay over. So that's just one less essay for you to write.
I haven't heard of that before. That's a really interesting
Yeah,
situation.
it's very nice.
Speaking of interesting situations, I see a question here about the trauma dump essay, and that's a thing that's like the term trauma dump essay has come up a lot, kind of as a joke among my friends. And this is a question coming up of how much can we share without it being too much. The way I see it, this is avoiding negativity. So when you're talking about your story, there are things that happen to you that are totally valid and totally worth sharing because they shape the person that you are. In my opinion, the value of telling these things that happen to you is in showing what you learned from them and showing how they made you a better person, how you grew from them. So in my opinion, I got personal in some of my essays, and I ended those essays by giving them an inspirational twist at the end or an inspirational tone throughout, even of this thing happened, I was able to overcome this and look at what I want to do with the growth that I experienced by overcoming it. So again, as long as you're keeping the essay relatively positive, I think it's okay to share and it's okay to be vulnerable in these essays. I think we might be coming up towards the end of the questions here. I don't see any more coming in. Addison, please feel free to cut me off if you do see one that I'm not checking right now.
I do not see
But it
any
has been
other questions.
awesome.
Oh,
Oh,
okay. What if you're passionate? What if what you're passionate isn't what you're majoring in?
that is
Oh,
totally okay. There
yeah.
are obviously a bunch of different factors that can go into someone picking their major. And if you are really, really passionate about something that happens outside of the classroom and outside of what you're studying, that is all right. You can try to find a connection between your passion and the thing that you're majoring in. That's a really great point to kind of tie those two together and write an essay based on that connection. Or if there isn't one that you can come up with, you can still tell a really, really strong story and apply to colleges. Do really well without having your main passion be the thing that you're majoring in. That is totally okay.
And then going on top of that, I don't know if you're talking about just the essays or like just the major in general, if you're trying to tie those two together, but it's very important that you find a balance in your classes eventually between what you're passionate about and then the courses that you do have to take. My classes this semester are very STEM based. I'm taking bio, the lab, chem, the lab, calc, and then my elective is a seminar about traveling. So it's a really nice balance. And so if you have that balance and what you're passionate about and then what you eventually end up majoring, it's really important because you're going to get burnt out very, very quickly if you're not passionate about what you're majoring in. But you may find out that you are passionate in what you didn't think that you were going to be passionate in, and that's totally okay.
That is such a great point. On the topic of burnout, I think this might be a good time to go ahead and close our session now that the questions have been answered. So we can all go and take a little bit of time off for ourselves or prepare for the day ahead tomorrow. You have our contact information on the slide here. I'll give you another few seconds to copy it down and reach out if you need to. We are here to support you to the best of our ability. It has been so great meeting with you all, getting to share our stories, share our experiences, and I hope you all have an awesome rest of your evening.